live. It says live on my screen.
All right. Okay.
I guess we can see the outside world can see us.
So hello everyone. Welcome for those who are tuning in to the broadcast, and then also those who are watching the video afterwards. This is our live chat with for Biology Fortified, and I'm Carl Harvey-Mogul, as you know, and David, say hello.
I'm from Melbourne, Australia, and I'm enjoying myself and pleased to be part of this conversation.
Yeah.
Hello, people, whoever's there.
Yeah, thanks for being a part of it, David, from down there in Australia. So Anastasia is on, but she's away from the computer at the moment, but she'll be back in a moment. And Pam Ronald in Davis, California, has been having some trouble getting online onto the chat. I think she's watching, and maybe she'll be able to put in some comments on the event page. But we'll see if we can get her in at some point to the broadcast. But we need to start talking about stuff, or else we're going to lose our audience.
Mm.
So the reason why we wanted to do this live chat is because one thing, a new way to interact with everybody, but also because Biology Fortified is kind of reaching a different point in its existence, and we realize we have a lot of projects that we want to have happen. It's going to require a little bit more organization, and it's going to require more funding to be able to actually make these things happen. We've got a whole list of different things that we have been doing, everything from the blog to the Genera, the Genetic Engineering Risk Atlas, to videos, and we have a project where we want to do that's a fact-checking resource, which we can talk about. We got some ideas about making some visual and performing arts. We thought about making educational materials. There's been some people really pushing for that, and who knows, maybe some public events, and we're thinking about some other things like starting up a podcast. So a lot of things to do, and some of them are free and easy, but others are going to require some dedicated time from not just volunteers, but also people that will need to pay to do this stuff, and so that really brings us to a different point. So David, what do you think are some of the things that you think would be the most valuable for the things that we talk about on our blog and on our site, you know, about biotech, about ag, about those things? What are some things that we can do that you think are going to be the most important?
Well, I think there's a lot of good things about the site already, and we want to continue doing those. So providing resources that can allow that to happen is important. I think I was struck by how attractive video, or you know, something more the moving screen is incredibly engaging. So
it's hard to take your eyes away.
These sorts of things could be pretty important, I think. So that would give it a new dimension, or we're doing something already, but that requires resources and time to produce things. Yeah.
Yeah, not only, I mean, so, you know, I've been able to do some simple video interviews, but, you know, there's only so much you can do with borrowed equipment, and, you know, you end up getting into issues like, you know, is the audio really good? Is the picture really good? And you know, I've been learning how to do this kind of stuff over time, but I'd really like to be able to get some people who have more professional experience involved. But, you know, because they're professionals, they need to get paid. So that's one of the things that we're kind of facing. I'd really like to do some really good, very, you know, well-composed, short interviews with scientists talking about the stuff that they do and why they do it, and that would require, you know, traveling around and getting, seeing their facilities and interviewing them and such like that, and then having somebody who can do the videography better than I can and do the editing better than I can, and you know, things that that would show people what's going on, show the people who are doing the research, who are doing the development, show the people who are criticizing it, and be able to put a human face to all this stuff. And that's one of the things that that medium can really do that a blog post really cannot.
Yeah.
So, so let's see. So the go ahead.
Engage with people who've got the energy, and are we going to are we going to be able to get enough money to get them seriously involved? How can we do that?
Yeah, I mean, so I mean, this might get into the funding question, which maybe we could sort of save that as like a second thing. But you know, as far as like a second thing to discuss, but as far as the projects, you know, we can start small with some projects and then see if we can have those build organically. But then, you know, maybe we might want to, for some of these projects that we think are the most important, try to put a drive to raise funds in order to get those started, like sort of, you know, to hit the ground running, so to speak, with cranking things out. I mean, I mean, those are two ways that we can do this, and it can be different for each different kind of project. For instance, I've talked a lot about the cooking videos that I've been working on, grabbing footage here and there, and setting things up to do so. And the first video is very close to being ready to go, and we just discovered a site that we might be able to use to essentially have an audience where people can donate like $1 per video, and then that can maybe get things started for that project. And if it ends up being good and effective, and if it gathers an audience, then it might be able to perpetuate itself. But then another, you know, because each video is just one effort that builds upon the previous one, it may be easy to do that. But then for a project such as a fact-checking site that we've been thinking about building, which we could talk about next, that would take a lot of work up front just to get it going, to have it be an actual serious resource.
That also, there is the what's it called, GMO answers. It's a professional question and answer site, but they do supply they tackle lots and lots of questions and answer them. So that's continuing for a while, I guess. So maybe there's other things we could do. Then we don't want to duplicate what others are doing. What things can we do that are different, or where we might be more successful doing our thing?
Yeah, I mean, so well, I mean, I can lay this out for what we've been thinking about for the fact-checking site. So we've been collaborating with a researcher, actually, essentially a historian at a nonprofit institute, to come up with this idea, and we also have a programmer who's working on the concept. And the idea is to make something structured kind of like Snopes or PolitiFact, where somebody would go there, if they're searching for an answer to a common question, then it would have the short answer at the top, then more explanations below, and then have ways to see if claims are being made by a certain person, then it would have actually a link to a page where it would list the claims by that person that have been evaluated, kind of like you would a politician, because there are individuals who some have been very accurate in the things they say, some have been not so accurate, and so people can check on what are people actually saying. And this Yeah, and this would be not just to fact check people who make critical claims about GMOs. The whole point is actually to fact check all claims that people make about GMOs, all the common things that people see out there, including the stuff that industry says. When they say, a common thing such as feed the world, well, what does that actually mean? And is that is that a question with a clear answer, or is that an unclear one?
Yeah.
And so we can make that sort of a simple thing for people to find out that answer. Because when we write blog posts, and even the stuff on GMO Answers, which is an industry site, but when we write blog posts, it's more of a I should actually have the camera on me, not you, David. But when we write blog posts, it's more of a narrative that we're describing, but that doesn't always work for somebody who's trying to just quickly find an answer to a question that they have heard. So I mean, we're gathering a couple of volunteers to help us get maybe a concept together, which we might be able to present in the next month or so to get some feedback from people to see what it would look like. Because I've seen some very similar efforts for climate change, where there's sites built around this. There's some for evolutionary biology that are a bit older to act as that kind of resource, because it's just like you hear like the same claim over and over and over again. And it comes up in blog posts and all that stuff, and it just it almost seems like a waste to write a blog post about one of those claims, unless it's like a really deep one. But instead, if we have this little page set up for that, then it doesn't have to take up the attention on the blog, but it can be there for people to find and to link to and stuff like that.
One of the things I realized listening to the debate yesterday was that there is this process of a kind of caricature or simplification or an extreme version of what people think gets sort of used again and again, and somehow you need to make progress of saying, well, no, it's not quite that black and white thing. And one of the things that's going on is a tendency to say either or, there is this one way of doing it, which is maybe connected with in so-called industrial farming, and another way which is a different way of farming. It's got lots of virtues. You've got to have one and not the other. Well, it's not quite like many of these situations are. The world is a little bit more complicated and nuanced and subtle, and people don't quite think in black and white. And we need to sort of say, well, no, what we're trying to do is get people together, talking about the whole picture in a constructive way. Maybe, but maybe if you can position this or this task of saying, well, no, it's not quite. That's not quite what people are trying to say. They're trying to say something different, or maybe we should approach it differently. So maybe that can happen.
Yeah, and yeah, you bring up a really good point. That's something that we've been trying to do for a very long time on our site. Is that there's not two sides. There are many different sides. I was talking with someone else from another university where they were thinking about putting together some events, and they were thinking, well, maybe we could do something on labeling. Okay, here's what you do. Get somebody who's pro-GMO, anti-labeling, somebody who's pro-GMO, pro-labeling, somebody who's anti-GMO, pro-labeling, somebody who's anti-GMO, anti-labeling, and do a discussion that way. Explore all of those different aspects to the debate, because it gets painted as this activist versus industry thing, and then like academics might be lumped in with industry, or basically anybody who doesn't agree with the critic gets lumped in with industry. They get called a shill and all that. But there are, I participated in some discussions at my university and at other places where what you may think might be the perspective of everyone who's in industry or in academia on one particular topic, there can be some very interesting divergences in agreements that you wouldn't realize, just like about genome editing technologies, about what, about the regulations of those. And some people think, oh, well, the industry, doesn't want them regulated because then they could just produce them. And others like, no, they want it regulated so that the big companies are the only ones who can afford to commercialize them. And then so there's no one view for these sorts of things. So I really think that having something that isn't coming from industry, but that just checks the facts on these sorts of things, so that we can get beyond just the one versus the other, and maybe hopefully encourage people to stop making the same claim over and over again if we already know that it's false. But that's, I don't know, that's been hard to do as it is, as I'm sure you know.
So you talked about getting diverse views, right?
Yeah. Oh, hello, Anastasia. Welcome.
Yeah, anyway, okay, so so you talked about getting diverse views, and I think that that's really important. I'd really like to see Biofortified get back to its roots. We're a group blog, and one of the original goals was to provide a space for scientists, especially scientists who don't have time to have their own blog. To have a place where they can talk, and other professionals as well, farmers and things like that. But as you and I have graduated from our doctoral programs and moved on,
Yep.
we don't really have that hands-on touch with graduate programs anymore, and we're unable to continue recruiting new writers. And I think that that's something that we really need to come up with a strategy for. Work our networks, try to get more diverse voices. We need people who are majoring in genetics, sustainable agriculture, soil sciences, entomologists. There's so many fields that are really exciting that we could talk about, and we really need to get those young, new scientists who are still excited about things and help train them to become writers for a non-scientist audience.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point there, a really good suggestion. And it's, as you and I both know, it's extremely difficult. We'll let's say go to the effort of putting together a post ourselves, and then we get a submission from somebody, and it's like, okay, we got to edit that and put that up, and then when doing all this day-to-day stuff, it can be difficult to allocate the time, even think about like, well, okay, how do we go and find someone else? And I have in the past, and even done recently, we might actually get a post about genome editing, because I attended a presentation by a grad student, and I'm like, hey, that was really great. You want to turn that into a post for me?
Yeah,
but yeah, we have to do something a little bit, I think, a little broader than just the one-on-one like that, because there is so much potential out there. There's a lot of people who want to say stuff, and there is a new conversation happening this year. It's happening on Facebook. It's happening on a few new sites have popped up. It's happening on Twitter as well. And it would be really good to tap into that and get more people involved.
Yeah, but it's going to take a conscious strategy to do it. And as you mentioned, we need editors. We need an infrastructure, and I'm not really sure how to get there.
Yeah, well, maybe for those who are listening who might have some experience in this, can put in some comments and on the event page or on our blog post, or send us some emails, give us some ideas as to how to get a little better at this, because I think that's something that's really going to be important.
One of the things I've sort of realized is that when you start something, like I started my blog post, and after time, if you work at it as you've done and we do, you build up a resource. So one thing we have gained out of the efforts and participation is something that is a great platform. So I think we're trying to make use of what we've done to extend it. It's not a waste. We don't want to leave it. We want to build on it. So taking it further is what we're trying to do. And all that, I think that the last few minutes of conversation about how we get a range of participants, how do we do that? It's talking about the people and personalities and interactions. How do we get it going? Things like these hangouts help enormously too, I think. But so, yep.
Yeah, and I think as you know, both Anastasia and I have discovered after graduating and going into the regular working world, not that you had tons of time, we had tons of time as grad students, but then it becomes a lot harder to find time in the middle of the day to go and to do anything, and it's usually just a little time while you're scarfing down a sandwich. Anyway, so. So yeah, so trying to involve more people. I mean, one thing that I sort of lament about the years that we've been doing this project, this organization, is that it's been really difficult to get conversations going with people who are critics of biotech. You know, you can approach very carefully. You can ask polite questions, but you know they're very wary. You know, I'm wary as well, but then it's very hard to keep a discussion going and not have it go into just, you know, pointless debates or things that don't matter. I'll even ask just like a simple question sometimes, and it'll go off in some weird direction. I'm like, okay, well, I really wanted to actually have a conversation about this, but
and then
it's difficult.
You find a conversation partner, though, you have the problem of people who bystanders who add rude comments and stuff like that. That's a challenge as well.
Yeah, and one of the things that you know isn't necessarily readily apparent when you're reading our blog is that we get comments submitted that get caught by moderation where it's somebody who's usually anti-GMO, but we get some who are pro-GMO as well, who they just start acting like jerks. They just figure this, I'm just going to vent. And so they'll put all caps, and they'll say everybody who disagrees with me is horrible and evil, and it's just so hard to have that kind of a conversation where that's most of the conversation that has happened, which leads me, I think, to something that I think would be a really important thing to do, and that is to branch out into areas that are completely non-traditional. Areas where people aren't already talking about this, because the people who are vested and involved in this whole conversation, they have decided, and so it ends up being bringing up the same things over and over again. It ends up being people who are upset and tired of things not going their way, whatever their perspective is, and they get angry. But the vast majority of people are in the middle and undecided, and that's where I think art could really be a help.
Yeah, why don't you talk a little bit more about your music idea, Carl?
Oh well, I don't know if I want to fully reveal this idea.
Okay, no worries. I guess it's suffice to say that we have grand ideas for getting art, blending the art and the science of it to open it to a broader audience.
Yeah. It kind of. Oh, I'm getting a little bit of feedback. I'm not sure from who. Maybe if one of you could turn down your volume. I think probably Anastasia, because we both got heads. Well, okay. All right. So it doesn't look like I'm getting feedback anymore. Okay. So this idea came from essentially. So you know. I'm working on these cooking videos. We did some music recording, and I was filming it. I was talking to the musicians, and we were thinking of various things, and I realized that, you know, music can tell a story, just like words can tell a story. But when music tells a story, it touches a different part of the brain. It'll touch that right part of your brain rather than the left. And I realized that we could actually create performances or create music, create art that tell some of these stories and convey some of this information in a completely different way that might be a little bit more widely appealing. And so I don't want to reveal exactly what the idea is yet, but everybody I've told it to, including musicians that I've worked with already, some of them are just chomping at the bit and they want to grab some parts of this particular plant I want to tell the story about, and they're thinking about trying to make musical instruments out of it and stuff like that, and have it be a production that kind of represents what is going on. So that's one of the things that that I'm kind of thinking about. And you know, to put on a musical production, whether it's just recorded or whether it's a live performance, that would be a pretty big effort, and it would be an interesting experiment, I think. But I think it's one that I would like to try. But you know, we need to be able to get together the resources to be able to put on something like that. I don't know if either of you had any thoughts. Both of you have your microphones muted, so I can't hear anything. Okay, well, I'm not seeing anything.
I can talk to myself.
Oh.
I can talk to myself without get my thoughts in order with the microphone.
So, I think that that's a good segue into our funding conversation, unless
Sure.
we have any questions about projects. Do we have any questions about projects before we move on?
Oh, like from the audience?
Yeah.
So I haven't seen anything on the chat itself. Let me just double check the blog comments right now.
Great.
So no, not seeing anything.
Okay, great. So, you know, how do we, you know, if we have an idea for a new project, you know, such as something that involves science and art, how do we get enough funding to actually move a project forward? And you know, it used to be that all we needed was a little bit of money because we had time. But now time is a resource for us as well. So that requires additional money to get over that hurdle so we can hire people to help with it. As much as we love our volunteers, we can't depend on them for everything.
Yeah. And we've got a few star volunteers who have really done some awesome stuff. But I don't want to keep asking them.
Right. We have to cultivate our resources, and you know, if we use up all of their nutrients, then we won't have them anymore.
Exactly.
So, you know, so there are lots of organizations out there that we could potentially go to and ask for grants from. And Carl and I talk about this all the time.
Oh, yeah.
You know, what would be good places to ask for a grant from? And, you know, we talk about, well, maybe that we could ask an NSF, the National Science Foundation. Sometimes they have science communication components. That one seems like a pretty safe bet. I don't think anybody would be concerned, well, maybe a small group of people, but the grand majority would not be concerned about introducing bias if we were to get funding from the National Science Foundation. But there's very few groups where we could say, that one's definitely safe. There are many more groups where we can say, I'm not sure if that's something where we're 100% comfortable accepting funding. So I think that that's really the key question behind this conversation, why we're meeting tonight, is to try to think about those issues a little bit and talk about it out loud in front of our audience, and see if we can try to resolve some of them. Yeah. So I guess I'll kick it off with an example.
Sure, go ahead.
So, so we know for sure that well, since the very beginning, we've said we're not going to accept funding from corporations that are involved in agriculture and biotechnology. Even though that would potentially be a large source of funding for us, we've said no, because that, you know, could, at least in appearance, compromise us so that we would be perceived as being biased. But there's a lot of foundations and charity organizations and things like that that are funded in part by corporations, both on the big ag side and on the organic side, things like that. So what do we do about these foundations that are charitable in nature, but that have some sort of connection to industry?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
actually
I'm getting
some feedback.
I think it's coming from
I think
yours,
it's coming from yours, Anastasia.
Okay, I'll mute me when I'm not talking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually might have the power to mute you myself, but okay. So yeah, there are a lot of situations like this. There are, for instance, there are scientific societies that have been around for like 100 years. And they've got, thousands of members, and they all pay membership dues, and they put on conferences. The conferences get sponsored by NSF and USDA, and then the companies chip in as well. And so, is it, 100% safe and separated to accept money from a scientific society that does have some industry money in its big pot? But that, it's maybe such a small slice of it, and, they don't control what we do, and we don't get anything like, oh, hey, you guys put this on your blog and we'll give you money. We've never gotten that, and I don't think we'd ever accept that kind of thing. Well, I don't think, we just wouldn't, because that's not how we do things. But when we're trying to remain independent, we're trying to talk about the stuff we do in our blog, then people go, well, somebody from industry contributed to this organization, and you've got, you're getting funding from that organization, so you're tainted, is kind of how they'll say, they'll put this. But these are usually people who are kind of looking for a way to dismiss what you're saying. And the real strange thing about this is I've observed both firsthand and heard secondhand that people who are actually from the industry, who go and they give a talk and they say, I'm from the industry, they just get, they'll get dismissed like, oh, they're from industry, right? But then if you say, hi, I'm independent, people get strangely angrier and more bent on trying to find out if you're from industry and trying to dismiss you with that same reason. And myself and several others, Kevin Folta and John Entine and Steve Savage went to Hawaii last year to speak related to the bills that were being proposed in the counties in Hawaii about GMOs. And Kevin Folta and I got attacked a lot. John Entine as well, but the one who's actually an industry consultant, Steve Savage, did not. They left him completely alone. And so it's a very strange thing, as we try to remain independent. That I just want to put this out there. There's sort of like this dedicated way to try to belittle and dismiss, which I think we need to be aware of. But that's not the majority of people out there. It's the very vocal.
I'm starting to think that this so-called tainted by sources is a distraction. The point is, do you have an argument or opinion that's based on information and evidence that's accurate, and are you being honest about what you're saying? And do you have critical scientific standards and ethical standards in the way you go about doing things? Now, I think that comes first, and I think that maybe this is too much of an impediment, this trying to avoid all possibility of being called tainted by something. Maybe you should be concentrating on, well, these are the standards you have, and your standards are that you don't push opinions because you're paid to say them. You push them because you believe they're supported by evidence and they are right, and they're accurate. So it's the standards of accuracy and fair treatment. Like, for example, something comes up that changes the story, then you should give attention to that, new information. It means that hey, you were wrong, right? You've learned that there's a part of the story that was missing that you were unaware of. Now, that's what and I think, there's one thing that came up actually in my email this morning, but a new thing about one of the issues that I thought had been settled. It's now got more complicated. Well, then ethics is that you bring this information to people's attention so they can understand what it means. So basically, I think we should be concentrating more on supporting ethical behavior and honesty and transparency rather than focusing on this so-called money taint, but which means we'll never get in. We'll never be able to do anything. And I think we agree that, like, the people who feel they're confronted by something they don't agree with will come up with a reason for suspecting that it was paid by industry, a mouthpiece for industry, whatever happens. So maybe we have to approach it differently. And transparent ethics is one of them. Like, we're committed to making sure if there's some awkward bit of information that we talk about it.
Yeah. And that is some of the stuff that. Yeah, Anastasia, do you want to add to this?
Oh, yeah, actually, I just wanted to say, so it's unfortunate that Pam hasn't been able to get into the Hangout, but she sent an email and she said she said she's cheering what David just mentioned, and she says she thinks we should go with full disclosure and set up a firewall. So I have to say I'm kind of in agreement with David too. I mean, no matter what we do, there's going to be someone who's upset about it. You can't please everyone.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I'm not saying that we should go out and say, hey, the biotechnology industry organization, give us funding, because that's probably a pretty direct conflict of interest. But these foundations where there's reasonable separation. As David said, if we cut out everyone, we're not going to ever have funding to do what we need to do.
I don't think we can claim we're independent. We can't claim that we're independent. We can do the high standards and transparency and honesty. We can commit ourselves to that. Yeah. That's what our standard is, to be transparent about where we have connections and to be committed to, well, I call it scientific integrity and ethical argument. That means you don't suppress awkward information and you face up to it. I mean, one of the things I get disturbed about is when in public I put questions actually to people who have a different point of view, and you put up a question and they avoid answering the question. I don't know why, but that's unethical, right? If there is a criticism, a point, like a way of looking at things that's relevant, you should not avoid it, you should face up to it. So that's where our standard should be. I mean, for example, in America, I think it seems that stewardship of herbicide resistance has not been as good as it could have been.
Yeah.
It comes up. The biotech industry could have done a better job in the United States of managing the emergence of glyphosate resistance. Right? We don't shirk that. We talk about it, and it means you should pay more attention. Right? So
yeah. Because I mean, going back to stuff that got me interested in this topic early on, back when I was studying genetics at UC Davis, I realized that the mistakes that industry makes can ruin it for everyone else who's trying to do something good. And it takes one mistake for that to cause reverberating changes in everybody's perspective and perception of it. And so, even for someone out there who's like, like I'm definitely pro GMO, like you should actually even just be like skeptical of and critical of what individuals who are using technology will do, because they can mess things up. And I think we've done that okay on the blog. We can certainly do more. It'd be great to have a little bit more dedicated time to have some people doing some writing and stuff like that, and talking about these things. So I mean, coming back to funding, so yeah, we're not talking about like going to Monsanto going, hey, give us money, because that's just like very direct right there. But what happens? I brought up this example in the blog post. What happens if there's a company that does business with a biotechnology company, like they're hired to do some services for them, and they have a foundation, and then they go, hey, we got a foundation, you want a donation? And I found some examples of this out there, and they've gotten money from industry, and some people might think, oh, that's just a channel for them to like get money to you or something like that, although there's several levels of removal from that. Maybe as a potential solution to this, I think Anastasia mentioned something that Pam sent as a note. Maybe we can talk about that, and she just sent me another note here, which I can read. And she was talking about setting up a firewall. Now, I don't fully understand how exactly that would work, what exactly that means, but taking the computer analogy, a way for them to be a way for organizations to donate money where it's very clear they don't have control or say or anything like that. Let me actually just read the message that she just said by email. So Pam says, I agree with the points you are all making. We can create a general fund that accepts all types of contributions and make an MOU to all donors that they understand that their funds will be used for whatever project we decide, that they will have no influence. If we mix all the funds, then there's less of a chance of a conflict of interest. We make this all clear on our website. In some cases, we can have separate funds that are specific for a particular project. So that's sort of been brought to the floor. What do you each think about that kind of thing?
Well, yeah, and I think that's an excellent suggestion, and we could, have this somewhere on our website, or bring that to, that is the arrangement we have, independence, and the funding is that way, so that's good, yeah.
Okay, Anastasia actually just sent a link.
Yeah, a link. I should have gone to it. I didn't click it on time.
And
all right, so we're working out that's sort of saying with ways in which we can structure our arrangements so they're transparent and assure people we are able to act independently.
Yeah.
I like this idea of the general fund. Like it's not quite blinded, because we're gonna know who is generally who the donors are, but if they're not donating to a specific project, then that takes a step back. As opposed to them earmarking and saying, here's a specific project that we're funding. I don't know. I'd love to hear from some of the listeners, about this. Can we invite people to
there's
speak?
another thing about our structure. And I'll just finish this.
Okay.
when you have, what I've learned, when you have partners and a group that are each accountable to each other, this is another layer of protection. That is, we are independent players. And for example, I once put up a post on Biofortified, which I had reasons for publicizing it. And Carl, I don't think, felt it was such a good post for Biofortified.
Mm-hmm.
But that's okay. But I listened to Carl, you know. So I'm accountable to the other people. So this is another part of the transparency and structure is we are obviously independent players. Like we're saying that there is accountability to a small board, a mutual accountability, which you know, our arrangements among ourselves are as independent players who accept counsel from the others, right? So we're doing this so that it's another layer of accountability in addition to the memorandum of understanding.
Mm-hmm. So it's funny, guys. So Anastasia's been sending some links to me, and us, and Pam also sends some by email. And we can put some of these links up. Actually, we can discuss further on the blog, like the question of a firewall, whether that would work to have a fund where donors can donate to that, and they understand that it separates them, and that we're not, you know, they can't make demands and all that sort of stuff. Now, I can see others as saying, well, this would just be a way for people to channel money to you and tell you to do stuff anyways. You know, people always come up with stuff, but but
we have checks and balances.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that go ahead.
If we spell it out, if it's part, you know, of our policy and our agreement, you know, if we say it simply, continue what we're discussing, then, like, by consciously doing it, we've made it clear. And like most things, like once I've signed a contract where this is spelled out, I go, oh, you know, I've just agreed to this. It formalizes, but it makes me pay attention rather than, you know, carefree, going ahead doing what I like. I remember that I've agreed to it. So this could be part of our memorandum of our understanding of how we behave, reinforce the ethics of our process.
I wonder if anybody does basically like, oh, maybe that this is essentially a part of it, but like where you, well, the donor sends in the money and you send them back a contract going, here you go, sign this. That makes you understand that you can't tell us what to do. But I guess that's sort of part of that. Well, one of the ideas that I thought about when it came to like the question of whether or not a certain organization would be a good one to accept money from, because, you know, let's say there's an organization that usually does political stuff, and maybe they could see that, oh, we're doing something related to what they're doing, and they might think, oh, well, maybe we can benefit our political thing by giving money to them, and then so we look at that and go, that might be kind of questionable. You know, one of the things we can always do is if there's a donor that we think might be a little questionable, is just put it as an announcement. Okay, we're considering a donation from this organization. What do you think about this organization, everybody? Does this fit with us or not? I don't know. Is that too complicated? Looks like Anastasia, you want to add something to this.
No, I think that we have to consider that you always have to balance transparency with privacy. And I don't know if I'm necessarily comfortable. I mean, there are some people who really don't like us, and I wouldn't want to make somebody vulnerable, make someone more of a target.
I see.
So we'd have to be really careful, I think, about that type of stuff.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, for instance, a little while back, with some organizations who were like I'm getting a lot of feedback here. Okay, there we are. With some organizations about funding stuff, and they're trying to ask questions about, well, who are your donors? And I'm like, well, I'm not going to disclose the individual people. Who are yours? And but yeah, that's a good point about privacy. But we can always reject things that we don't think are good.
That's the importance of having a strong board.
Okay, so let's see. So I don't know. So what else do you guys want to discuss in this regard? I mean, do you want to talk about the potential of a firewall sort of fund thing, and further, we can put it on the blog if people talk about that idea. What do you think? What's the next step?
I'd like to talk a little bit about matching funds. So this is something that we've kind of dreamed about. I don't even know if it's possible or feasible in any kind of way, but it would be cool. So what if we have somebody approach us, it's Big Bad Monsanto, and they say, hey, we'd like to fund XYZ project. And we think, hey, this project would be beneficial to many different voices, so we could approach some other organizations on the other side of the coin and say, hey, we've been offered this funding, but we don't necessarily want to accept it because it could compromise, it could provide the appearance of bias. So to balance that out, so that we can provide this new program for everyone, would you consider matching that donation? I wonder if we could do something like that. Yeah, I don't know if that's even possible. I don't know if people on the other side would be willing to even give us money, but I think it's something to think about.
Yeah, I mean, well, I can see some of the different ways that it could be approached. One is like, oh, well, that's kind of interesting. Maybe it's a project that could benefit our organization, so maybe sure. Others could be, well, Monsanto or whoever, Bio or something like that wants to give you money for some project, and you want to get money from us for a project that Monsanto wants. All of a sudden, they're going to go like, no, we don't want to do that. But I think if it was the other way around, where we go, we want to we want to do this project that is going to affect all of you. Let's say, I mean, it could be a real simple thing, such as to put on a conference. Like, we've talked about all kinds of things, all kinds of public events we could do. One could be something like, let me actually switch the camera to me, I guess, as I'm talking. We've thought about doing things like putting on a conference to talk about coexistence, and to get discussion going in that area, and maybe try to make some progress in the discussion. Well, that is something that touches on many different sectors in this whole debate. It's everything from the biotech companies to farmers and farmer organizations, whether they're GMO farmers, non-GMO farmers, organic farmers. It touches on what the organic food companies are doing. Grocery Manufacturers Association. There's so many people where that issue affects them. I myself don't see a problem with putting on a conference and then trying to get all these different stakeholders to contribute to make that kind of thing happen. That's just like what scientific societies do when they're putting on a conference. And it's got to be clear. They don't control anything. Of course, they'll get a little logo somewhere that says, "Yay, thank you for contributing." But they don't get to. They don't get to decide the programming or anything that kind of thing. Or there are other projects we thought about. That's just one example.
Even Genera is one, because it affects multiple different types of stakeholders it could be useful for.
Yeah, potentially. But I think for some of these things, at least if we were to try to do one of these matching fund type things, I'd be interested in approaching different organizations simultaneously. I wouldn't want to do anything that goes from like, well, one organization. Let's say some organic related foundation approaches us about something, and then we go to the equal and opposite side to then ask for funds to support the same kind of thing. I'd rather instead have the idea and then approach those organizations simultaneously. I think that would actually be... Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
We could even keep it blinded so that, you know, the different organizations wouldn't know who else was participating until later. Something like that. I don't know.
Perhaps.
That's intriguing.
That's intriguing.
I mean, it's kind of a pipe dream. I don't honestly even know, like, who would be willing to donate to us as far as these groups go, but it's something to think about. And, you know, it never hurts to ask.
I'm listening to this and reflecting on it because I find one thing I have learned in the last few years is that group discussions can be very productive. But I think, again and again, this worrying too much about whether the sources of money are going to taint it is just hampering us. I think we should put, the firewall will be a code of ethics and transparent description of the relationships that ensure we are independent or that we commit to, and then we wouldn't enter into arrangements that hamper us from doing this. But if we have this, the code of conduct and the commitment we have to a scholastically sound way of doing things and an ethically sound way of doing things, we can point to that. I mean, we have this conduct for our organisation should be proper, and that's enough. We won't enter into any arrangements that prevent us from sticking to our code of conduct, and we can explain to people this is the way we're operating. We're operating by independent decision making. So I think then we can't keep on saying, oh, but because we are getting money from somewhere we would be tainted. Well, I think that's whatever the place we get money from, you can say that. So I think with this firewall can be our arrangements and standards within our little organisation for how we make decisions, and then we can move on to trying to improve the flow of support and assets and ability to do things. So we're in this to try and do things rather than to never entangle with anyone who could be remotely considered to be biased. So we've got to have a layer of protection from the standards we stick to. I haven't said that very eloquently. Carl is
I think you
more
did.
eloquent than me.
No, actually, I think you said that. If anything, we should just like quote that part right there as the summary of this whole discussion.
It's on record. It's transparent.
So just got a note from Pam. She's got to duck out from watching, but she says she thinks we have a general consensus, transparency as much as possible, and she likes the blinded idea. So yeah, so we got a couple things to think about, and I imagine we'll probably be discussing this a lot more by email. But you know, we can put something out for people to talk about on the blog as we think about what what would be the best way to do this, and maybe some people have some ideas on what this looks like. Maybe they've seen this before, and we can tap into other people's knowledge and experience on it.
I personally would really like to hear what different people think as far as the funding situation goes. I'd love to hear from readers with diverse points of view, and I mean, we're trying to provide a community, a place for people with different views to meet, and this is part of the ground rules of that community. So I'd love to have some input.
Well, can I just so quickly latch into something that connects to this? I've wanted to mention it before, but this problem is not new. It exists, I believe, in every board of a public company, a corporation. Directors are directors who have other interests. So probably there's a whole discussion and out there in the real business ethics community of how you have good board behavior. And, you know, like, I'm sure, but what I'm saying is this conflict of interest situation comes up all the time with, in the business community. So maybe we can learn from that. I know I'm saying like business in general, or company board ethics, or maybe there's a center for business integrity, you know, like at Sydney University, there's one called the St. James Center. So maybe, you know, getting some advice, some ground rules, and possibly even genuine ethicists, you know, ethical experts for board behavior. Maybe we can learn from that. I don't know anything about it.
We're really good about calling in different experts when it comes to scientific topics. So you're right, let's call in experts when it comes to business topics. Maybe we can find somebody who's willing to consult with us on these issues.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. That sounds like a good idea to me.
And yeah, it is also carrying it over. One of the reasons people distrust biotechnology, plant biotechnology, is the supposed ethics of the companies involved in the area, right? One way or another. So, hey, it's a pretty strongly relevant topic. So maybe we can connect, you know, it's how to get good ethical behavior in boards of organizations, and the sort of what's the function of the board? It's a counseling for the managers, right? So it's an oversight of the managers. So there's a whole area there that's connected to how more people can be more trust organizations and what their standards are.
Yeah,
great. Well, on that note, I think I'm going to have to get going shortly.
Rose is sleeping, I think.
Yeah, I need to get her up to bed.
Okay, well, I think this pretty much wraps up our discussion. I think we covered a lot of stuff, and I would like to second what Anastasia said about I'd really like to hear from our readers and people who have taken the time to watch this.
Yeah.
Please comment on our blog posts about this topic and let us know what you think. And then I think we need to find ourselves some experts on this topic to also help guide where we're going to go with this.
Okay, great. Thanks very much, Carl and David. It was a pleasure talking with you.
Yeah, nice to meet Ro and Anastasia again. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much.
And thank you.
Thank you, David.
And Pam's on the background.
Yes, and Pam, who struggled to navigate the difficulties of Google Plus. They really don't have their Hangouts thing perfected, where the notifications don't quite work right, and sometimes they call your phone instead of your computer. And, yeah, but yeah, so thanks for being a part of the discussion anyways, Pam, and thank you everybody for watching, and I hope to hear from you. And yeah, have a good night, everyone.